So what do you know of oocyte retrieval, doctors? Have you watched? I know Anusha has watched. Shaista, you have watched? You watched, both of you? How many? Three? How did you find it? Easy, difficult, unable to comprehend? Take off your mask, doctor. Hmm. Yeah, it looks very easy actually. But even I was thinking like that when I was in Mumbai. Doctor was doing around 10 pickups per day. So I was thinking it's such a easy procedure. But when I came here and put my first patient, it was very difficult. Then I had to call my senior because my coordination was not at all going hand, eye, leg. Everything should go in tandem, isn't it? And your needle should come in the needle trajectory only. I found that my needle is coming somewhere and the needle guide is somewhere, and it should never happen because we'll be piercing something else. So your needle should come within that trajectory only. Some machines has only one dotted line, some machines has three dotted lines. Elma? So when you take the machine and get it installed, you just find out, fit the needle guide, check how the needle trajectory is there, how I should orient my probe, everything you should learn from the service providers because each machine has different settings. We have initially struggled with machines. And one of my senior on the day of pickup said, I'll not come. I'm not well. So you should be equipped with proper skills and knowledge and some backup team also. OPU is not a joke, isn't it? So initially we have learned how to stimulate how to evaluate a patient, couple, husband, wife, both, and we know where the male factor lies, where the female factor lies. You're all clear on that, right? Okay. And you all know who needs IVF also, who needs IUI stimulation also. So once you decide on IVF stimulation, when the patient comes on the day 2, you decide she has to undergo IVF stimulation. So what are the criteria you take to see how I should stimulate, how I should start a dose? Any ideas? Okay. Baseline scan, we see the initial AFCs, antral follicular count. Yes. Then, okay. Pardon? Priyanka?
Ma'am, age, antral follicle count, AMH, the response to previous medications, the response seen in the previous cycles,
Yeah.
cause of infertility, duration of infertility.
Yeah. As I said yesterday, accessibility of the ovaries also should be checked on the day 2. Because if she is a case of severe PID, repeated surgeries in the past, or endometriosis, the ovaries would have been completely lodged in the POD, fixed. Even if you start IVF stimulation and you could come to know later that it is completely inaccessible, it is very difficult to plan. So day 2 itself, you should tell them the ovaries are completely adherent to the POD. I'll just start the stimulation and see. 5 days later, miraculously, sometimes ovaries comes up with stimulation. I've seen many people know completely buried, totally plastered. Once you start stimulating, it slowly comes up neatly and it becomes accessible also. So we have to counsel the patient as she told age, AMH, AFC, BMI, previous response to stimulation, everything you should see, how she behaved with the previous stimulation, did she get no eggs or she landed in OHSS, all those you should keep in mind and you should make proper notes on the file and also highlight what are the important points you need to look after. For example, she is allergic to some antibiotics, you need not repeat it again, or under GI she responded very badly or she did not wake up at all those things you should note and keep a note of it. So initially when oocyte retrieval was started, they were just studying the ovaries removed in laparotomy and they were extracting eggs and making researches. Later they used laparotomy itself for removing the eggs, but it was very cumbersome, invasive, and the patient had severe problems. adhesions, pain. Repeatedly, you cannot open the abdomen first just to aspirate the ovaries, isn't it? So Steptoe and Edwards used laparoscopic method for many years, but even that was invasive. It resulted in many complications. And then a commercial needle, OPU needle and pump was available. Initially, they used to take a 20 ml syringe fitted into a proper needle and aspirate. The nurse used to aspirate it. Then came transvaginal oocyte retrieval techniques. It was a welcome change because it was very less invasive, less painful, and people used to immediately recover from the procedure. And Steptoe and Goswami modified the ultrasound guided oocyte retrieval by having a suction apparatus, tubings, everything which was sterile and tested for embryotoxicity. So initially technique of choice in the first 10 years of IVF era was laparoscopy only. Then when ultrasound came into existence, we had transvaginal oocyte retrievals. It was very simple, no complications, and it was a gold standard. Even nowadays, some people use transabdominal oocyte retrievals. Where can we use that? When ovaries are not at all accessible vaginally. And, yeah, it's not allowed coming. Yeah, transposition done or some highly placed ovaries. In that case, or when broad ligaments are coming on the way, then we use the transvaginal probe itself put on the transabdominal. It's not the abdominal probe. Whatever needle guide you have fitted into the transvaginal, we place it on the abdomen. We see it and then we pierce the same needle from the abdomen, that's all. So there are many studies with this which say transabdominal is also safe and effective compared with the results of TB, but it is very difficult. I have not tried at all. One I have seen somebody doing. So very important is more than the procedure, all this pre-op, couple identity, what time they have to come, what is the procedure time you have posted, what is the name of the patient. So always keep a whiteboard in your OT, right? First case, which case, who is the couple with the husband's name, because so there are so many times Kavita Ramesh and there are so many times Sunita Pavan. So you should always know what is their identity, call their identity number, and when the trigger was given. I've seen so many people mess up because of wrong timings of trigger and wrong timings of OPU. The doctor is very busy. She stimulates in her clinic, posts the OPU in some other hospital in an IVF center. She's not able to come in time. No coordination between the clinic and the doctor. By the time she comes, all follicles have ruptured. I've seen in the files, no follicles got. Or it will be empty follicular syndrome because of the wrong trigger. And so many times doctor gives the orbital injection to patient herself to inject because we give it usually in the night. There are no staffs available in your clinic. They ask them to inject on the thigh. So we don't know whether she has injected it properly or not because we have seen in post luteal phase support, evaporin, they will not inject only. Just like that, they'll be turning. They don't know how to do it. When she comes, no, the whole 1200 is still left. So we come to know she has not injected only. Also with insulins, people don't know how to inject themselves. You should be very clear who has given the trigger injection, what are the pre-op investigations done, what was the E2 on the day of the trigger, what was the E2 on the day 2, how did it rise, was the P4 very high, what is the conclusion we come if the P4 is high on the day of trigger? Anusha? Okay. Premature LH surge has occurred. Good. And the retrieval rate is very less. Oocyte quality will be bad. And also P4, if it is high, she is not a suitable candidate for fresh transfer. You have to go for a frozen transfer only. So you'd see who gave it, what was the dose given, and also checks the nil by mouth status. Did you give the pre-op instructions properly? Take history regarding pain abdomen. Nowadays we are seeing this too much. People who are old, who are poor responders, poor reserves, they usually come with pain even before 35 hours. So 33, 34 hours only they come with the hand held on the abdomen, bent like this, crying of pain. So the process is set early for them. And there will be some notes of the previous IVF stimulation also. All follicles ruptured, we could not retrieve anything. In that case, you have to post it 34 hours early. Okay. So call the anesthetist early. see whether there is free fluid in the POD, follicle ruptures have occurred, and keep the anesthetist somewhere close by so that he comes early and you start the procedure early. Last week we saw a case. The first case, she had pain abdomen. The OT staff has not informed us. And by the time doctor reached, the patient was crying of pain. Immediately we shifted. Almost 8 expected, we got only 4. All 4 had ruptured and there was lot of free fluid in the pelvis. So we lose those eggs. And it's of no use because she's a tubal block lady. You cannot do IUI also, isn't it? Many people say you can aspirate from the POD and extract the oocyte, but I've never seen it happen. So as I told you, ovarian accessibility assessment is very, very, very important. During baseline scan, you just see where the ovaries are there. See if blood vessels are too many surrounding the ovaries, and does she have an endometriotic cyst in between, and see how the other ovary is completely vascular. And very high and vaginally unapproachable ovaries may pose lot of difficulty for transvaginal scan also, and also for the transvaginal oocyte retrievals also. See, you should have good people assisting you who can give proper abdominal pressures. Without them, we cannot manage sometimes. I'll show you few videos. How with anesthetist giving pressure only, it is coming to our transvaginal needle. If you don't have anybody to help, you are alone, no, you are stuck sometimes. Yesterday, that OPO, it was completely accessible during transvaginal scans during trigger. But yesterday on the table, how it was? Completely behind the uterus. What did you do, Anusha? Hmm. Anesthetist, huh? Completely they gave pressure, and they should be helpful anesthetists, helpful OT staffs. And this is very important. Embryologists should be involved in each and every case of your IVF. If they're freelancers, they just come for pickup, they don't know what is the history, it's completely wash out of cases. So we always ask the embryologist to look after the case history completely the previous day. They should know whatever the baseline tests we have done. Lab staff should ensure that all appropriate consent forms are filled by the partners. Sometimes they say we never knew. We were never asked, though we have told them. So have proper consents and write everything and document it there. Study all details of previous IVF cycle. What was their response? Did they respond very poorly or did they hyper respond? What was the number of oocytes expected, what number we got, what was the insemination done, ICSI done, what method of sperm preparation was done, what was the fertilization rate, what was the quality of embryos and embryo status. Everything has to be studied in detail and people should plan with the embryologist what you will do this time. Doing the same thing each time will never give you results. If she has failed multiple times IVF previously, you should discuss with the embryologist. See, the ejaculate semen sample has been used. The embryo quality has been very bad. Shall we do PISA because the DFI is very high? Shall we do MAX, magnetic sorter? Or shall we do microfluidics? You should discuss with them prior. Otherwise, that day you are caught off guard. You will not know what to do. And sometimes husbands will not be able to give the sample at all that day because of tension, stress. What will you do with the oocytes retrieved? You should have a proper plan. One time I know, very famous organization, they have thrown the eggs because husband was not able to give the semen sample and they don't have a backup semen sample, and the embryologist does not know oocyte freezing. So entire 21 oocytes they have discarded. What will you explain to the couple outside? Be cautious, plan everything properly, and also repeat semen analysis is required in the beginning of the treatment cycle. When they come with some reports, don't believe it. Your lab, your andrologist, everybody should test the semen sample once. Are there a lot of pus cells? Are there enough motility count and morphology? Because we cannot depend on the outside semen sample report at all. We know one patient who came with azoospermia report and we did it on day 2 here. It was 20 million. Either problem with the lab or the sample or the technique, we don't know. We would have easily counseled him for donor, isn't it? So when indicated, DNA fragmentation index should be done. When it is high, please plan for PISA, TISA. Talk to your andrologist. Also, plan a max or a proper sperm preparation technique with the embryologist. Have a backup semen sample which is cryopreserved, especially if the husband is staying outside, he has to travel on the day of pickup, he does not come in time. All this will be risks involved. The risk of introducing any infection into the laboratory should be avoided. Completely check the male and the female whether they are having any genital infections, profuse discharge, PV you have to check, perspiculum you have to check, and properly treat them before the procedure. Because on the day of pickup, if there is so much of infection, you will be introducing the same to your OT and IVF lab, which is very, very dangerous. As I told you, the embryologist should completely examine the case notes to prepare the laboratory records for the following day oocyte retrieval. Tell them how many pickups I have tomorrow, day after tomorrow, and what are the plans I want you to execute. So just check what is the culture media they are using. They'll be very good in that. Just check what is the culture media using to have proper pH stability. Kindly mute your mics. Doctors, kindly mute your mics. You miss so much, no, Soumya? You logged in, through your mobile, you logged in? No. There's so many important points, no? Should have left early. You were only driving. Okay, check with the embryologist because proper maintenance of temperature, pH stability, and osmotic needs of the oocyte is very, very important for your good embryos and good implantation. Ask them what is the culture system they're using for insemination and embryogenesis. Pre-pickup scan is very, very important as I told you. Why? I told you many reasons, no? Tell. Naiji, pre-pickup scan. Before the pickup, accessibility we have assessed. Okay, we'll assess again as you said. Then
whether all follicles are intact, ma'am.
ಏನಿದೆ? ಏನದು? Somebody was answering, Zainab.
To check whether all follicles are intact.
Yeah. If she has any pain, check whether all follicles are intact. Good. As she said, check once again the accessibility. See if there is lot of free fluid in the pelvis.
Endometrium. Check the endometrium.
Not very important. Okay.
Know the follicular development, ma'am.
Pardon?
To know the follicle is developing well or no.
Any features of OHS?
Dominant follicle.
Yeah, all those are secondary. Very important is follicular rupture. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So if they have not given the last dose of antagonist, what happens? If they have missed the last dose of antagonist, what will happen?
Premature follicular rupture.
ಏನ್ ಸರಿ
You make let's search.
ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಮಿಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರಿ ಇದ್ರಾ? So anesthesia or analgesia, a good analgesic method is very, very important for good retrieval, especially if the ovaries are not accessible, anesthesia is not given properly, no? The patient starts breathing heavily. The ovaries starts moving. One of the complication of OPU is mobile ovaries. You are putting the needle and ovaries are moving. It goes and hits somewhere. Again, it comes down. Your needle is somewhere. So you should have a proper anesthetist protocol so that ovaries are stable and also have one proper anesthetist for OPUs. He has to give proper abdominal pressure. Even if OT staff should be properly guided that he has to give proper pressure when needed. Otherwise, we go into lot of panic. Satisfactory pain relief should be there. Good rapid onset and rapid recovery too, because they will have to go back in 4 hours, 5 hours. They usually work. All are working women. They need to recover fast. Ease of administration and monitoring should be, and there should not be any say toxic effects on the oocytes too. You all know what are the general anesthesia drugs we use: fentanyl, midazolam, propofol, proper oxygen monitoring, saturation and monitoring. Nowadays, we use conscious sedation without any assistance for respiration and cardiovascular system. Most commonly used method. Some people combine this with a paracervical block and pre-ovarian block, POB. Just find out what is POB and let me know. So paracervical block, you know, we give in the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position. And when you combine paracervical block with conscious sedation, people usually have very good pain relief and also very good retrieval rates. There are many controlled randomized trials on this. We never use paracervical block, we just use conscious sedation. OT setups are very, very, very important. So your OT sister, OT technician should know what are the things to be arranged. Dry block heaters, warm blocks are very important to maintain the temperature at 37 degrees centigrade. If there are any too much fluctuations with the temperature, the entire oocytes will be damaged and you will never get a good embryo which implants. Falcon test tube should be properly tested for embryo toxicity, taken from a good reputed labs, and also it has to be calibrated with the 37-degree temperature. A good glass syringes with blunt needle should be kept ready if the suction pump is not opening or not working properly. Your embryologist will keep all the beakers, petri dishes, four-wheel dishes, and all the consumables properly. Suction pump should be of good quality like Cook's Rocket or Indian make Shivani. Don't compromise on that because it will just give way when it is most needed. We always keep one backup suction pump with us because we cannot take risk in this. If the suction pump doesn't work and you don't have any other method to suck that, the entire IVF procedure goes to a waste. Proper OPU needles you buy, there are many marketing people who will give you very cheaper OPU needles, just half the cost, one-third the cost. When you do the pickup, you know how blunt it is and it is not at all piercing the ovaries. It is causing shearing damage to the ovaries. Don't compromise on these. I know it is very cheap and you are getting lured by that, but don't. Even IUI catheters you might have seen. Cooks cost so much. The other Indian companies will give you one-third the cost, just very good discounts. So don't compromise on OPO needles, tubings, and have a good ultrasound machine. And your technique of ultrasound should be perfect. All of you do ultrasounds? Good? No, yes, no, yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How confident you are in doing OPU?
We have not attended the practice, ma'am.
With help, Soumya will do. Others? Chandramoli? Okay. Transvaginal? Doesn't it fill back? Small ones. Okay, E2 is not secreting if it's not high. If E2 is high, it fills back, doctors. 150 and all, more than 80, it fills back. If it E2 is normal, it is not hormone secreting. You can learn for initially cyst aspirations. Hmm. Okay. So if you have many follicles, similarly you can do, you think. Okay. You, doctor? Ultrasound? But you have to buy. The entire knowledge goes a waste if you don't know ultrasound. So you should be very good in your scans, especially for IUIs, follicular monitorings, leave alone pickups. That comes late. But start your own scans. At least all the patients who comes in, put a probe and see. Free at least. We'll know what is the pathology or normal physiology inside. Hmm. Simple. You have done? Okay, good. Distal week. Hmm. Yeah, I'll come to that. That's very correct. So you should have proper temperature control, warm blocks for test tubes. OT technicians should come early and switch on the blockers because it takes time for it to reach 37 degrees centigrade. And you should have handheld test tube warmers also and heated laminar tables where there are integrated tables of laminar flow with good 37-degree temperature maintaining tables. You have to invest in all this if you want to get a good success rate. So these are the warm blockers with test tubes inside maintained at 37. Immediately coming and oning, it will not come to 37. So your OT technician should come early, make everything switched on, keep it at 37 after when you reach and anesthetist reaches. So keep the entire set ready, sterile, with all gauzes, with all alleys. If there are sudden unexpected complications of inaccessible ovaries, you should have all the instruments ready and your transvaginal probe should be cleanly covered with a sterile probe cover and your needle guide fit in snugly and it should not move. Your anesthetic machine should be properly serviced and your pulse oximeter should properly help you in during anesthesia. And also all the drugs for anesthesia should be kept ready. Everything should be monitored one day prior. So 5 to 7 megahertz probe machine is usually required for sufficient penetration depth. Transducer should be long, 40 centimeter, which is easy to handle during the scanning and also during the pickup procedure. The shape of the probe should be at least slim and sterile cover or a finger of a sterile surgical glove should be fit into it snugly and tied properly. It should not convey during your procedure. Very, very important is attach the needle guide properly to the transfuser, very tight when it has been placed in a sterile cover. I have seen once when I had not checked the needle guide and it was very loosely done and I had already started the procedure. I was feeling that something was not okay. Took out and checked, this needle guide was not snug, it was loose. My needle and the guide was going somewhere else. So once the OT technician handovers the probe to you, check the needle guide properly and then insert. That's a very, very common thing to do. Okay. There are many probes, many needles available. Whenever you buy the scanning machine, check the probe and the needle guide what he has given. Ask for the proper settings. Learn everything properly because early mornings during OPU, those service engineers will not pick your calls. So document everything. 2 or 3 people learn the whole thing. Be cautious. Aspiration needles, there are single lumen and double lumen. You might have watched the flushing of the follicles also. When you want flushing in poor responders, you have to use a double lumen technique where you aspirate the follicular fluid and in the other channel you flush the pre-calibrated ringer lactate. So repeated flushing will break the oocyte cumulus complex, dislodge it and get you because you are having a very poor response. When there is good response, you can use single lumen also. So aspiration set has a needle, tubing, sampling tubes ready to use and only needs to be connected to the suction pump. It is very easy now, not like previously. Sterile and Mour's embryo tested also and it has to be used only once. Otherwise it becomes blunt and infected. Suction pump, very important investment in the IVF lab. It has to give a proper negative pressure. When you are having the mature follicles, keep it between 90 and 110. I don't go to 120 also. If the pressure increases, there will be lot of zona cracks and oocyte cumulus complex it becomes injured. So you will not get good embryos at all. Be very cautious of your pressures. And always train one person to check the pressure regularly with the torch because it's a dark environment. Somebody should have a torch and check the pressure. When you're aspirating immature oocytes, keep the pressure low like 40 to 60 like when you're doing IVMs. You should have proper eye, hand and foot coordination. Very important like laparoscopy. So your foot will be managing the pressures. When you are entering, you should manage with the paddle. When you're coming out, you have to take out your leg. You will be doing scan with your hands. Your eyes will be seeing the ultrasound monitor. So Cook aspiration unit has everything neatly packed in this one. Helps a lot in oocyte retrievals. Initial days, what they were doing is they were connecting it to the syringe, 20 ml syringe, and then they used to operate with the thumb handle. But it was very difficult to control the negative pressure and it used to damage the OCCs. Always better to use the follicular aspiration set. Keep the pressure between less than 100 and less than 50 for immature oocytes. So this is how it looks on a 2D picture. The ovaries are all stimulated with many follicles. And you have put a transvaginal probe with the needle in situ, and you are guiding the needle into the ovaries. Usually there will not be so much space between the fornix and the ovaries. There is a lot of empty space shown. It won't be like this because we will guide the ovaries snugly fit into the fornix, and probe is also very closely related to the ovaries. And here you can see it is fitted into the collection tubings, and you have the paddle which your foot will be pressing, and you will be collecting the follicular fluid and shifting into the embryology lab. So there are physics of oocyte retrieval. There is a question on the short notes also. Please go through in the Gardner's textbook. What are the factors affecting oocyte collection? Apart from the skill and knowledge of the doctor, there are many things which can affect our collection, like pump vacuum flow, velocity of your follicular fluid, needle lumen size and length, follicular pressure and size, collection techniques, anesthesia, how the patient is breathing. There are many factors in this. Completely go through. It is very well written in Gardner's. There is something called Cappuccini effect. Have you read? In Gardner, he has mentioned about Cappuccini effect. Before going into the follicle, if you press off your paddle, it sucks in lot of air. So there will be lot of frothing inside the test tube, and he calls this a Cappuccini effect when it disturbs the complete oocyte complex. As you are piercing. And when you come out, you have to take it out. Yeah. And when OT technician gives you that media to aspirate, only then you have to press again. And when it is over, again remove. Be very cautious and conscious. So clean the vagina properly with normal saline. Initially, they used to clean with povidone iodine, but later they found it was harming the oocytes. So even if there is infection when you are using povidone iodine, use again saline and properly wash out all the povidone iodine. I don't recommend iodine. We always use normal saline because initially when you are taken care of vaginal complete infections. So use vaginal ultrasound, use 2 probe covers. Inside you put the gel, outside that put saline and put one more cover because gel is ootoxic. Focus each ovary, see for the follicle, see any intervening tissues. Very important. Bladder, cervix, bowel to be examined properly. Completely empty the bladder. Don't go through the bladder again and again. It will result in hematuria. We saw one, no? Soumya was there or somebody was there? You're there? Check for the position of major vessel, put Dopplers, see if any abnormal vessel was there. If in doubt, put color flow and confirm please. Don't just blindly prick the needle. Keep the aspiration pressure low around 110. Don't go beyond 120. Avoid contaminating the needle tip, please. Don't keep touching here and there, seeing somewhere, touching here, touching there. It will contaminate the needle tip and it will become blunt. You will really struggle in pricking the ovaries, especially patients who have come with infertility history, endometriosis history, PID, no, ovaries would have lost its normal texture. It will be very hard sometimes. So your needle should be very good. So only then it pricks. And in donors who have given repeatedly, how the ovaries would have become, no, it will be very hard to prick in. So it should be lined to the most accessible position on the screen. Very important. Line the most accessible follicle up against the biopsy line. Your trajectory line and your follicle should be properly placed. Only then come in. Push the probe against the ovary and carefully insert the needle inside the foil. I'll show the video. The path of the needle. Dr. Aman. Ulfa. Mute your mobile, please. This is the problem with online classes. Push the probe against the ovary. Very, very important, Dr. Hanusha and all. You'll go set your own IVF labs, no? When you don't give proper pressure on the probe and you don't push it against the fornix tight, you are not able to access the ovaries at all. It will be very loose and you'll be pricking somewhere. Very important. It won't be mentioned in textbooks. But as you do, you'll know. You have to have a proper pressure against the fornix and hold that pressure. Don't relax it once your mind goes off somewhere. The path of the needle as it is guided into each ovarian follicle is accurately defined by a biopsy guideline imposed on the ultrasound screen. Check with your service engineers and properly install it. The highly refractive walls of the needles identify its path. It's quite easy in most cases. Enter with a sharp jab. Don't just manipulate and turn it like that. It shears the ovaries because we have stimulated the ovaries. It is very hemorrhagic, very vascular. Don't shear it. Enter the follicle at the maximum diameter, go to the center of the follicle and see how the follicle empties. And you have to manipulate very little once you are inside the follicle because it keeps going off focus, your probe. So you should keep manipulating very, very gently. Otherwise, ovaries and all will be cut. Okay. So you will know when you are entering into the follicle, the echogenic tip will be seen easily. I'll show you in the next one. Suction vacuum applied before entering the follicle. I told you, no, to prevent leaking of follicular fluid. As you are entering, you apply the suction vacuum. After aspiration of few follicles, it may be a good practice to flush the needle of any vaginal mucus or tissues, especially when you are going through cervix and uterus. Those tissues will get caught into the tip. So when it stops the follicular fluid, it's better to remove and flush with the media. So follicle should be aspirated, it totally collapses and it empties the whole thing. Otherwise, your oocyte might be in the last drop of the follicular fluid and you may miss it. The mobile ovaries can be near to the probe tip by the assistant pushing it down and you giving lower pressure and he giving the pressure from the upper abdomen. So as I told you, coordination of eye, hand and foot pressure is very, very much needed. The probe should not be moved with the needle in the advanced position, please. When you want to move the probe, take out the needle a bit far towards you and then move the probe. See, you have advanced the needle to well in advance and then you move the probe. What happens? That needle will be cutting the ovary and we'll never know. She'll result in post-op hemorrhage. The tip of the needle should be seen on the screen at all times. It should never be advanced if the tip is inside. As Dr. Soumya was telling, all follicles which are difficult to reach, which are in the distal ends, which are close to the vessels, you feel very difficult in your initial stages of OPUs. So it's better to give up rather than risking the patient. Also, there will be so much of bowels moving around, momentum moving around. Be cautious when you are doing it. And be cautious when there are large blood vessels, especially when there is altered anatomy in infertile ladies with big fibroids, endometriosis, repeated surgeries. Complete architecture of the anatomy is completely gone. So you won't know where the vessels are. Do a proper blood flow and then put the needle inside. When you take out the needle from after the one ovary, you can flush it of blood clots and then start the next one. I also advise you, once you finish one ovary, check for the bleeding. Put the lights on and check for the bleeding. And if there are no bleeding, then you continue with the next, put off the lights. Otherwise, you control the bleeding and then start. Otherwise, heavy flow will be there, will not know in the dark environment. We usually keep one girl to put torch and see bleeding. You can also adopt the same method. Speculum is inserted and the bleeding points are identified. Apply pressure to the bleeding point with a gauze swab held in the end of the sponge holding forceps. Be patient. Usually it stops on its own. Don't be in a hurry to always remove it and keep checking. Even if it doesn't stop with proper pressure, you just put a simple Alice on the bleeding point and wait. It usually occludes the bleeding vessel. Vaginal pack can be given, but be cautious to remove it after 1 hour and recheck it. Maintenance of suction is very, very important. If this is not maintained, follicular fluid will be lost at entry and exit of the puncture. Movement of the needle tip in the follicle may damage the oocyte, particularly to the cumulus. Don't move too much because you'll be damaging the oocyte complex. It was a common practice to spin the needle tip to completely empty the follicle. Nowadays, it is not recommended. We don't do it. Even some people were scraping the follicle walls, but it is not recommended. Just see, this is a easy pickup. How we put the transvaginal probe and how the ovaries are accessible. Very good stimulation has been done. We have enough number of follicles here. Can you see? Yeah, and it is easily coming to the probe. We are putting the Doppler and checking the major vessels. All the vaginal cleansing, everything is done now. And now the needle is entering into the right ovary. So the entire follicular emptying is happening. And then we are advancing into the next ovary. Be careful because it is very close to the vessel. Complete the distal follicles first so that it will be easy to do the proximal follicles later. Keep it in the center of the follicle. See for the emptying. Go with a quick, sharper jab rather than screwing it inside. Most of the follicles recollects the fluids again. So you should know which are the follicles you have aspirated, which are the follicles which is recollecting fluid. You cannot go and again do it because it's a hemorrhagic fluid. You will be spoiling the whole thing. So be conscious of which follicles you have aspirated and which are the follicles which have refilled. Okay, you have completed one, going to the next. Yeah. With one prick, complete the whole ovary. Don't again and again remove the needle. With one prick, complete the whole ovary. That is a very easy procedure for you. If the patient is moving or uncooperative, you just will tell the anesthetist so that they deepen the level of anesthesia. How do you assess you are proficient in OP or not? Soumya. Number of follicles we have aspirated. Instead of that, on the HCG trigger, number of follicles more than 16 mm and the number of oocytes. What is FORT and FOI? Write down, no? Find out follicular output rate and follicular oocyte. Both are in Kamini Rao book, I think. You have to tell me. In IMA group, you can post, no? FORT and FOI. That's a very good criteria to tell. How was your stimulation? How was your retrieval? What is your skill? So after the whole pickup is done, completely scan the pelvis to see free fluid anywhere, collection anywhere, measure the free fluid so that when you are discharging the patient, you can check if it is increased, the volume of the fluid has increased, check everything and document and keep a printout to show the patient also. Huh? So this is how the ovaries looks on the day of trigger with proper measurements. Any follicle more than 17 mm will give you very good M2 oocytes. So can you easily calculate, right? How many M2s I may get, how many oocytes I may get, how many M1s or GVs are expected, seeing the follicular diameters. So if you are meeting with the standards which you have expected, that's a good proficiency skill. As I told you, flushing, its value is very debatable. We are using in cases of poor responders and very few follicles when there are there. We repeatedly flush with ringer lactate pre-calibrated and then I have not seen much difference. I always prefer single lumen. See, there is only one follicle on the right. She wanted IVF only because both tubes were removed in hydrosalpinges. So there is no other option for them. They don't want donor eggs. So they repeatedly stimulate themselves. Even if one egg is got, they are okay. See, we are completely aspirating it. And we are asking the OT technician to flush the ringer lactate after the follicle is empty. Just keep watching it. They are moving a lot. See, it's coming inside. Can you know? See that? Yeah, only 1 ml, 1.5 ml is enough. Don't put too much of flushing fluid because the follicle, no, it really distends and it ruptures, leads to hemorrhage. So be very cautious. I usually put 1 ml, wait, and then slowly put 1 more ml after sucking. Some say aspiration of hydrosalpingeal fluid at the time of oocyte retrieval can be done in the same sitting, but don't give it to the IVF lab. It should be discarded. Simple, safe and effective. Also, if you are seeing uterine fluid collection during IVF ET cycles, during OPU under anesthesia, you can aspirate and send it to the lab for analysis. So precautions, any patient with any bleeding disorders, anemias, you should be very careful. Even if some minimal bleeding is there, they may land in shock. Give prophylactic antibiotic prior to the procedure. I always ask that question and then start the procedure if the antibiotic is gone. And at the end of the procedure, I usually insert clindamycin vaginal pessaries if I'm not going for a fresh transfer, if you are planning a frozen transfer. And before being discharged, Garbhagudi, usually we do a repeat scan and see whether there is any collection, any free fluid or any problem, and then discharge them. Don't perform any endometrial injury on the day of oocyte retrieval. Many people do this. They do hysteroscopy, some scraping and all. I don't advise you. Even if you want to give GCSF, be cautious. Just be near the internal os and you push the GCSF. Don't go inside if you are planning for a fresh transfer. As I told you, check for the cap fitting over the tube. This is the most common mistake for follicular fluid not coming. Very simple mistake, but we are not cautious sometimes. So you have to snugly fit the cap for the pressure to suck the fluid. Also, keep the pressures properly monitored during the procedure. Keep it between 90 and 110, not heavy, more than 120 because it will damage our oocytes completely. What is this? See here, there is loose tube fitting. The follicular fluid is not at all coming. See, once you put it tight, it starts flowing in. And your follicular fluid should be clear like this if you are doing a proper pickup. Otherwise, it becomes hemorrhagic, messy, bloody. Kink in the tubes, very common. Sometimes follicular fluid does not come at all, though you are in the center of the needle, giving proper pressure. Then check for kinks like that. See, they have put the heavy steel thing on the, so keep it completely free. And as I told you, check for the probe properly, whether the needle guide is fitted correctly, whether it is snugly fit. Oh, there's a video, we'll see. OT technician has given it, but it is very loosey. It should not move like this. It should fit it to that depression there and you should tighten it. Otherwise, your entire procedure will be very complicated. See. Okay. Loose cap and blocked needles. Be cautious. Once the needle is blocked, you can flush it through one more channel. Push the media or ringer lactate and open the blockings. And your OT technician should be changing caps and pump pressure and he has to maintain it properly. When the one entire tube fills of the follicular fluid, he has to change it to the next tube, isn't it? He should be careful in not spilling the fluid. Even one drop should not spill. You should tell him and guide him. So follicular aspirates are passed to the embryologist. You know all this. Follicular fluid examination will be done by the senior embryologist. Oocyte usually appears with varying quantities of cumulus cells. The large jelly-like mass of hyaluronic acid in the cumulus makes easy identification. The OCC may be associated with little or no expanded cumulus. What does this say? Expanded cumulus says it is a mature oocyte, M2 oocyte. When it is very tight cumulus, it says it is a immature oocyte. Cellular debris in the fluid must be examined again to not to miss a oocyte. And usually what we do is once the embryologist scans the entire follicular fluid, one more embryologist scans it again so that we don't miss the oocyte. Even one oocyte is very, very important for the lady. And there are a lot of studies saying that one extra oocyte will increase the pregnancy rates by 11%. So be very cautious in embryologist scanning the oocytes. When there is high degree of blood contamination or difficult OPUs, they find it very difficult to screen the oocyte. That time they dilute the fluid with the media and then they check. Also follicular fluid with endometric fluid is very, very difficult to scan the oocytes. They have their own methods to dilute it. Grading, as you all know, metaphase 1, GV, metaphase 2 are the gradings. Very mature and post-mature eggs are also there. When you are delaying trigger by 1 or 2 days, waiting for it to grow more or waiting for other follicles to grow, we make it post-mature. So you have to give the trigger in the proper time. Lower magnification, your M2s looks like this. Higher magnification, see the corona radiata completely expanded, sun-ray experience. So I told you difficulties in OPU, ovary stuck behind the cervix and uterus. You may have to go through cervix or myometrium. Bleeding is expected then. You can put Alice in tissue forceps and pull cervix to one side and adapt OPU. Many a times I've seen in anesthesia, when the ovaries are going behind the uterus, you're not at all able to do by abdominal pressure. What you do is put a speculum, hold it with the cervix, Alice, big Alice, and ask somebody to pull it to one side. Easily ovaries comes up. You can use that technique sometimes. Try not to aspirate till OPU is completed. The endometriotic cysts don't aspirate till your OPU is completed. In case you have done, flush them, flush the needle many times or throw that needle and take a new one. Vaginal and cervical bleeding usually stops with pressure. Sometimes only one case I have put suture. Very rare it is. Usually it stops with Alice pressure or vaginal pressure. If you have damaged major vessels, you have to immediately call a lap surgeon or you have to open it up if you don't have any laparoscopy skills and immediately stop the bleeding. This is a difficult pickup. Sir is giving pressure from both hands. See how it has come up now. Even though there are intervening tissues, I think uterus is there. I'm coming through the uterus. See? Can you see uterus above the ovary? Sir is giving enough pressure to come it there, but I'm going through uterus. So much struggle is doing. Yeah. Okay. Needle is coming through the uterus, going into the follicle. Otherwise, we don't have any chance of retrieval for her. And once you go through the uterus or cervix, no, what do you say? The needle becomes very blunt and it gets twisted because of that thick tissue. Yeah, it is very difficult. Even ovary is not seen properly, but we are managing somehow. Call seniors for help when you see such ovaries. Don't do it alone. We have to crush our ego sometimes. See, needle is completely bent. Yo. Even other ovary is completely behind. I'm going through that only. Post-operative, be cautious. Monitor her properly. Keep her for some more time. Only discharge after you are sure that all her vitals are stable hemodynamically also. She's proper and your scan is normal. Amma, see, so difficult. No, ovary is not seen. Some shadowing. Last follicle, very distal follicle. You have to be careful. Too much pressure, it goes off that side. See, it is going actually. Vowels are all floating, so be very cautious. Difficulty in sin pickup, there could be a hydrosalpinx aside the ovary. So you should know which is hydrosalpinx, which is ovary, which is the vessel, because in the cut section the vessel also looks the same, and here the bowel is also looking the same. So we should not prick it thinking it is a follicle. Endometriotic cyst is sitting right in center of the stimulated ovary. Here it is to the side. We can take off the aspiration of the follicles and then go for the endometrios if at all you want to aspirate it. Usually we don't aspirate the endometriotic fluid at all. We leave it aside and treat it with Lupride or other drugs. So usually blood loss is very minimum. Pelvic free fluid is also less than 200 ml. You should document it at the end of the procedure. How much was the loss? Vaginal bleeding, as I told you, sometimes it stops with just pressure tamponade. In people with some factor 9 deficiency and all, it is very cumbersome. Sometimes it leads to ovarian necrotizing vasculitis. When there people are on anticoagulant, be very careful. You have to stop it 2 to 3 days before. Local pressure, overswing or laparoscopy or laparotomy as the case expects. Intra-abdominal bleeding also can occur when you are damage the major vessels, especially in patients with low BMI, lean patients, severe PCOS. We are very likely to damage their vessels. Or in the history of surgery, what I told you, when the anatomy is completely distorted. Such patients will need transfusion or laparoscopy. Look for the bleeding site. If it is not being located by laparoscopy, immediately convert to laparotomy and control the bleeding. There are many times when retroperitoneal bleeding also been documented, but these are all rare complications. But you should know what are the rare complications too, because in theory we have to answer everything. Retroperitoneal bleeding is usually identified by periumbilical hematoma Cullen sign, which reflects a retroperitoneal hematoma of a benign course. All these are in Gardner. Please go through completely. Prevention of bleeding, visualizing a peripheral follicle in cross section. Differential diagnosis from a blood vessel is very important before pricking the blood vessel. Aspirate all follicles without withdrawing the needle tip from the ovary to avoid multiple vaginal punctures. Have very gentle manipulation. Don't be in a hurry to complete the procedure. Always have a proper visualization of the tip. If color Doppler is available, puncture of blood vessels can be completely avoided. Don't over distend the follicular flushing because it distends and it ruptures and results to ovarian hemorrhage. Infection is one possibility. So you have to give proper antibiotics when they come on day 2, treat all their infections. And when you are doing a procedure, clean their vagina properly with normal saline and give a pre-procedure antibiotic to clear the infections. It always depends upon the technique of vaginal puncture. Infections, presence or absence of pelvic infection or pelvic endometriosis, it is a high needus for infection. Even hydrosalpinx or bowel during the procedure and you have punctured, it will create lot of infection to the patient post-operatively. When you are suspecting lot of infections, you can just clean it with povidone iodine one day before, and on the day of the procedure, you can clean it with normal saline. Prophylactic antibiotics are not a must. Only 1 gram pre-operatively is enough. Presence of pelvic adhesions may be associated with pelvic infections after transvaginal oocyte retrieval. Pain, you know, it will be very minimal with conscious sedation. We can manage with regular things. Rare complications are ruptured endometrial or dermoid cyst. Acute abdominal symptoms will be there. You have to manage with laparotomy. They have documented acute appendicitis with puncture holes in the appendix also. Uterovaginal fistulas, injury to the ureters, rectus sheath hematomas. All these have been documented, including vertebral osteomyelitis. Empty follicular syndrome, how many have encountered? It's a question for you. What are the types of empty follicular syndrome? Don't know, pseudo and genuine. Kamini Rao has given complete one chapter for this. Fully read it. What are the causes of true follicular syndrome? What are the causes for pseudo? Pseudo is when you have given a wrong trigger, when your aspiration technique is wrong, or when the HCG which you have given is out of fridge and it is not bioavailability is low. So how do you differentiate true from pseudo? I didn't get.
Follicular fluid has to be checked for
Beta
HCG.
HCG.
Or you can do a pregnancy test also. What follicular fluid you are giving inside, take one preg card. The battery la. Sir, one ನಿಮಿಷ ಕರೀರಿ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ. Whatever follicular fluid you are giving into the embryology lab, do a preg card with that. Put that follicular fluid like urine. So if it comes strongly, battery out of the if it comes positive, then it is HCG bioavailability has completely done its job. So it is a true. If HCG is come negative, then whatever injection you have given has not acted. So it is a pseudo. You can give a repeat HCG trigger and do a retrieval 24 hours later. Okay. Charge ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲಮ್ಮ. What are the causes for true for empty follicular syndrome, doctors? Pseudo, I told you. True?
PCO, polycystic ovaries.
Receptor defects, ma'am.
Yeah, receptor defects, follicular genesis defects, genetic problems. You read the whole thing because it is a main question. There are many things to learn in this. It's a separate chapter also. We'll be dealing with this. So as I was asking, how do you know the proficiency? So you should know how many oocytes was expected, how many you have retrieved, and how many more than 17 mm follicles were there on the day of trigger. More than 15 you can take it into account. And you can measure every case you are doing. First 20 cases you should be always done under the supervision of the seniors. Then you can take on with the senior standing besides